So my talk is a little bit different. It goes in a little bit different direction than we've seen today, but I'm hoping to tie it all in by the end, which is how my talks usually work if you've seen that before. I want to talk about education in the age of change, and particularly in terms of how technology is guiding and changing what we're doing as educators. I've done a few technology talks before. I'm hoping that this one's going to be a little different, and I decided to create my own images for this one, so if you're enjoying them or not, let me know later. As we know and as we've seen today, our world is changing, and technology is a root cause of that. We've got many, many different technologies coming to the forefront, and our students and ourselves are going to be faced with many different changes as we go through our lives. And technology is the root of that. There's a few new technologies. These are not ones that are cutting edge. These are ones that you are probably familiar with, in fact. You can see a digital printer, a 3D printer up at the top. You've got Minecraft in the middle there. Oh, all the young kids laugh. And then the leap motion that enables you to actually move yourself physically into a digital space by hovering your hands above this little machine. All of these things create interaction between two worlds. And so we've got a digital printer where you can take something physically out of a digital world and create something physical in our world. You've got something where you can craft whatever you'd like, digital playground, playbox. I used to call it Lego when I was a kid. Now you don't have to pretend that it's an actual farm, it can be a farm. And then the leap motion that allows you to interact with things inside the computer, which is still baffling me to this day. I've got one, and I still can't use it effectively yet. But education's at a crossroads because of this, because these technologies actually have the ability to do some of the things we do as educators better than we do. And that's a scary proposition for teachers, because industries change based on technology coming out. And I wanted to give you two quick examples in industry, and I did a lot of research on futurism and how things change. And when they talk about industries changing, there's two things that happen. You can either have a competence-destroying technology, which means that the initial structure of the business falls apart because a new technology is introduced and is better than the previous one. Or you can have a competence-enhancing technology where the technology actually is blended into the system and makes the system more effective. So, which do you think I'm hoping for? So competence-destroying technologies work like this. There was a great example that I read about, and I found it in a few different places, so I wanted to share it with you. Glass blowing. From about the 14th century up to the early 20th century, most windows looked something like that. And what you would have is in your town or village or even a big city, you would have a master glass blower or several master glass blowers who would blow their massive bubbles of glass, and they'd be flattened, and then they'd actually cut out circles to put inside of these windows. Now every town had to have a master glass blower, right? Made sense. And unless you're really, really wealthy, you couldn't afford glass at all. Wealthy merchants might have something like this. You can see that you can barely see through it. It's mainly for light passing through. And wealthier people, kings, queens, that sort of thing, would get the edge of the glass bubble, which was much flatter and clearer. You could actually see through it. Around 1910, a new technology called the Colburn Machine was invented. And basically it took silicate, popped it into a hopper, and a ribbon of glass came out that was pulled from the machine and created a flat surface known as a window pane as we would know it today. Now, you can see that they've got a stack of them. They've got a few laborers there. What they don't have is any glass blowers. So as soon as this technology was created and they were able to create glass faster and more effectively, all the glass blowers were out of a job. They had to figure out some other way of making the meals. Now, the Colburn Machine isn't the end of the story. Around 1930, 1920 is when it was patented. A new process came about called float glass. Now it still used the same hopper technique, but instead of pulling it out over a conveyor belt, which actually happened to create some breakage, the glass cooled too quickly. It wasn't exactly even, so that it still had to be ground and flattened a little bit. Float glass produced perfectly even glass. And what they did is they floated it over molten metal. So we've got float glass, which now can produce constant streams of glass with less breakage that doesn't have to be modified after the fact, and they can produce at any thickness they want and in quantities that they want. Now, the effect of float glass was the industry that then had a labor force around it. Float glass was much easier to produce, much more cost effective, and the scale of production went way higher. So, competence enhancing technology. Competence enhancing technology we're aware of, and most of you know what this thing is, the printing press. And the printing press was a competence enhancing technology because it didn't put anybody out of business. The monks were still writing their books, and the monks still had a job in the clergy. And that was the main production of books at the time. But what it did enable was the sharing of information. And that transmission of information between people and over time created a demand for literacy, a demand for knowledge, a demand for more information. And so books became more readily available, they became produced more, and they became cheaper to make as the processes improved. And again, just like the Colburn Machine and float glass, this process has been modified over time to produce books more cheaply and effectively as well. But literacy enabled what has now become our modern education system, because we have to be able to learn to read and write to share this information between us. But we talk about the democratization of information. The internet has provided us this window into the world. We can become experts in almost any field just by doing a Google search, right, kids in the front here, right? If I wanted to learn about nanotechnology, I sure could. We saw a presentation on that earlier today. So what's the value? What value are we bringing as educators, right? If we're not prepared to modify our practice, and my goodness, you guys have been great about telling us about all the great ways we're modifying practice to do this stuff. I'm so excited that you're going to see the end of this presentation. So how do we fit into this new age? Most of you have talked about it already. We need to tinker with new technologies. Don't be an expert in everything that's out there. You can't. There's new technologies being founded every day. Just like MySpace was the Facebook of the 1990s or 2000s, we now have Facebook and we now have Twitter, which is superseding Facebook. We can't be masters of every technology that comes out, but we can make sure that as we go forward, we're willing to try out new things, we're willing to test and see where things fit. And hopefully I'll show you a piece of that as well here in a second. Facilitation, and you guys have talked about that over and over today, the fact that we need to draw those connections between us and our students, the connections between the knowledge that's out there, asking those really important questions and making sure that we're in a mode of discovery as well, that we're willing to learn alongside our students, and we're not trying to be the font of all knowledge. We're not trying to give the answers, but we're trying to co-create knowledge. Something new, hopefully. And look for connections. Those three technologies that I showed you earlier can all be combined, and I don't know, I might have to try it at some point. I'm a little scared and freaked out about it. The younger kids will probably try it. But if you think about it, being able to put yourself into a computer, right? That idea of having a technology in the front that enables you to touch and grab and move things inside of a computer. When you import that into a digital world like Minecraft, where you can actually create and craft a world and create problems in that world, things that might not be solved yet in our real world, but if you could create them realistically enough, the students could manipulate in a digital playground and solve some of those problems, and then bring their results back into the real world. Right? Create on a 3D printer that physical thing, that physical solution that they've then co-constructed in a digital world. I think it's a pretty exciting time. But we have to be able to build those structures and use the tools and technologies available to us, those things that we've found that are appropriate to be adding into our practice. Okay? Khan Academy is a great example. Khan Academy is great for providing a process of learning. But if you're not pairing that with something else, if you're not creating those relationships around teaching and learning, where students can ask further questions or seek further direction or refocus their learning to solve the problem at hand, then all that knowledge is just out there floating. We haven't drawn it into anything real. So while we can't predict the future, I'm hoping we can help set the direction. And that really was the purpose. My guiding question with this, I've sat down with many teachers over the years and done work on working with technology and putting forward new ideas into the world. But the big question that teachers always ask is, if I put all of my information out there, if I give myself and all of this stuff that I've collected over and record it, put it out there on the web, what's the use of me? Well, I think today's been a great testament to the value of the relationship of the teacher and the student and the mentorship that happens with that. So I'm pretty excited about the future. I was a little trepid about it when I was doing the research, because I thought, can a machine really do what we do better? Well, it might be able to do it faster. It might be able to do it with better standards, or to a degree where they might be able to answer a question better. But ultimately, we're all human. And I don't think that there's ever going to be a point where a machine can educate a human better than a human. Thank you.